Good morning and welcome to WNHH FM's Dateline Hamden. I'm your host Sam Growett, inviting you behind the headlines to talk to the people that make Hamden tick. John Gelati helps the town get revenue that it needs to run its schools and keep its citizens safe. He's the town assessor, and that means that sometimes he has the very difficult job of explaining why people's taxes are what they are. John is here in the WNHH studio to tell us about that. Thanks for coming in, John.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you for inviting me this morning.
Now, it strikes me, and I've yes. So it strikes me that you sort of have an impossible balancing act, which is that you have to try to make Hamden's properties generate enough revenue to fund essential services in the town, but you also have to make sure you're not overtaxing residents. How do you manage that balance?
Well, the priority, of course, is making sure that assessments, which are the property valuations, are fair and equitable. And from that base, the calculations of taxes are determined through a combination of analysis of the budget as it relates to the amount of assessment, and that produces a mill rate. So what's important, of course, is that the values are fair, and there's regular revaluations, which are conducted every 5 years, and the values are held in between that time.
See, when you say the values are held in between that time,
they don't change. They're not reappraised unless there were improvements made to a property. So between reevaluations, basically the base is static.
You said every 5 years.
Yeah.
Is that standard in the United States? Is it different in different places? What determines the length of time?
Well, that has been a moving target. Once upon a time, it was 10 years in Connecticut, as well as some other places, like, for instance, Southampton, Long Island. It was 40 years between revals. So, of course, that made for an enormous mill rate. There's been a change to 5, and in some states they went to 3, and it appears as though 5 tends to be pretty much the place where most municipalities and states are landing. In the Midwest, assessments are done on a county basis, also a little different than the municipalities, much larger.
Interesting. And is that 5 Hamdens, for Hamden specifically, or for Connecticut?
For Connecticut.
Okay. So you came to Hamden in the spring of 2018.
That's correct.
Where were you before?
Well, originally had begun working in real estate and ad valorem appraisal in Connecticut, and that led me to Rhode Island, of which I became the assessor of Providence, Rhode Island, for a little more than a decade, and then a contract assessor after that in Newport as well.
So I imagine that Providence, Rhode Island was a really interesting place to be assessor. What shape was the city in when you came in, and what were you dealing with there?
It certainly is an interesting place, and I actually was the monitor of the reevaluation, which was in progress in Providence when a federal investigation, which source was originally the assessor's office, sort of broke, and that changed quite a bit, certainly for the city, and it resulted in mayor as well as deputy tax assessor and I think the tax collector, and there were several other people that ultimately went to prison as a result of that. So it was a very, very serious time for the city.
And what was your role in dealing with all of that?
Well, originally I came in for a brief time as the deputy, and then there was a new administration after just a few months, and I became assessor for the town. for the following 10 years.
I said, did you have a lot of things you had to change, a lot of systems that you had to change?
Yeah, at the time when I first came in, it really was not at all technologically savvy. There was still a lot of reproducing of data manually in triplicate, and their software and their analysis, their CAMA software, computer assisted mass appraisal software, was also rather static, where they would just use it to find information, but they didn't actually use it to calculate any new information. So also was a matter of creating operational efficiencies in the office. It was originally a staff of almost 40, of which was eventually I was able to reduce that to like 25, 22, 25 people. And I think that in the end, the biggest task that was at hand was to restore the confidence in the assessor's office and the process of reevaluation and the fair and equity of the assessments. So I spent a lot of effort working with the public regarding that. And I also had this rather unusual circumstance that occurred. When I took over, the Board of Tax Review did not have a quorum, of which I tongue-in-cheek say quorum was in prison. It was actually the case. And so as a result of that, the Providence Bar Association had a meeting, and they decided that in order to preserve their standing for appeal, that they should need to file litigation against the town and against the assessor. That's not a personal lawsuit, but in the capacity of assessor. So I started out with approximately 2,000 lawsuits against me or against the assessor. And I was actually, as I said, I was there as a monitor. So the reevaluation, I continued, and I had stopped the reevaluation because I didn't like the quality of it, and it was deferred for a year. And then, I pretty much tackled what was at hand, and I had a process that I used, and I was very, very consistent at it. I persevered, and as a result of that, not only the public, but also my colleagues within the office also felt reassured. It was a very traumatic experience to have the FBI come in and take your personal things and say you can't leave, and you don't know what's to come off from all that. So everybody really needed a leg up as far as that goes, and I had really no obstruction. Pretty much I was able to move forward, and eventually a lot of my work, of course, consisted of the development of tax stabilizations for the town, for the city of Providence. And the purpose of tax stabilizations are basically to create incentives for development. At the time that I first went there, there were basically holes in the ground in the center of town because the river had been moved and the train tracks had been moved. And the land was really only available for lease because it had been assembled by an investor. And of course, his terms were very much to his liking. And so the development needed to be created with some incentive. So it was very, very successful in the long run. If you've been to Providence, it's really quite charming. It has continued to move forward with that.
Yeah, it now hasn't been in a while, but it does. What I've seen of it, it has seems like it has a growing downtown.
Certainly.
And then you came to Hamden, and did you grow up in Hamden?
Yes, I did, and I actually was a very old feeling. My grandparents raised their family here. My parents lived here as well, and I had been gone for about 35 years. And when I was considering, I knew that Hamden needed an assessor, and although kiddingly, I was interested in some other positions, but I said, "Well, when you see my resume, you're going to probably want me to be the assessor, perhaps." And go ahead.
What else were you interested in?
There was a position which was no longer funded or never really came to fruition. That was a financial advisor, the liaison between the mayor and the council. So I thought I might be helpful at that. A lot of my work, of course, is been in negotiations constantly and communications. And I, as you know, I have graduate degrees in uh, real estate investment analysis from New York University, and I have a master's in public policy from Columbia University, with concentration in finance. Um, but
Oh yeah, I wanted to hear why
yeah,
you decided to come back to
well,
Hamden.
so what transpired was when I was considering coming and taking the position, I had an opportunity to speak with the mayor, Mayor Lang, and to discuss with him, what his vision of Hamden was and his expectations of what he thought an assessor who was perhaps a little more uh, able to deal with the public and with my development background as well. Basically, what would be a good solution and a plan, really a strategy to go forward. And as I continued to speak with him, I was really reassured that I had confidence in his integrity, and so I decided to say yes, and here I am today.
So, as you mentioned, you have other interests in economic development and finance. Um, as assessor, what can you do to actually grow the town's grant list? That's something that a lot of politicians talk about as a really important next step for Hamden.
Well, I think that where there's the two pieces of the expenditure budget, which of course Mayor Lang is a very apt budget analyst, and then there is the base, which is the assessment total value of taxable property in Hamden, and that in order to really grow and expand to the capacity of Hamden, because Hamden is really it was a country town, and it was very charming, and now it's a suburb really of New Haven. And in addition to that, it is a city that is host to uh, large and really becoming nationally known academic institutions with Quinnipiac, Southern Connecticut, Albertus Magnus, Yale, which of course are closely aligned, Paris School of Art, and so I think that Hamden could really expand the development of Dixwell Avenue and really redevelopment, I suppose you really would have concerned. And I think that it would be an opportunity. There is development already going on there with certain housing, and there's the canal trail which goes down there, which is very appealing. And I think that Hamden really could be known for the town where you can come to school and stay and get a job. And I think areas of interest, data in general, is the future in America. You see it in all kinds of markets, and stock market analysis, et cetera. So I think that with continued effort, there is a rather strong emphasis on economic development currently, and they're reaching out in a number of areas, number of aspects. That's a much broader base of activity than just real estate development. But certainly, the real estate development would be key to expanding the base, and ultimately, the result would be a lowered mill rate, which of course would make values probably continue to rise and would make it even a more appealing place for people to come and stay and raise their children, because the school system is really very good.
Yeah. And what kind of development specifically? You said not some real estate development, but then also Dixwell, I think, is a really has a lot of potential for new businesses. What kinds of businesses would you want to see there?
I think that it would be a combination of some certainly residential development, but a lot of office and flex space, which would pretty much accommodate technology, because I think that that is the strongest base to go with, and the utility of that. It appeals to who would be the people that probably would want to go there and stay there. And again, students who've come in, gotten used to Hamden, and of course, you can access New Haven as well as easily. It's not very difficult to get onto the train to go to New York or to go to Boston. And of course, there's moves, to of course have a different rail system, which would be even more efficient. So I think it's a combination of types of real estate, because basically, we create sort of to some degree an old idea of a downtown, where they're basically, I think it would be fabulous to be able to walk to what you need to survive. Basically, walk to work, walk to the store, and laundry, whatever it is that you need. And if you've lived in cities, you'll realize, that would be a very good vision. And it's kind of curious, for instance, when if you live in New York, you realize that people have neighborhoods in New York, and they'll go to a certain block, and then that's it. And something is on the next block. No, you don't go there, because that's not where you live. And I think that kind of allegiance could be developed, and I think that it would be very, very attractive. I think it's a good time for development, and I hope as what is already in place now, sustainability and the importance of ecology, and I think the type of development, the design, and the structure of it, solar energy, could be fundamental to the success of that redevelopment of that area. And I think that Hamden could really become a leader and an example for that type of development. There are a lot of communities which are experiencing what Hamden is experiencing, and I think that there's no reason we have the assets there, and you don't have to go too far to reach out to the splendor of the country. Just go north just a little bit, and certainly we have beautiful Brooksvale Park, Sleeping Giant State Park, as well as two rather large areas, and the whole bike trail is very interesting for people to ride on. And I've spoken with people who use it, and they just love it. It's just good. It's just beautiful.
Just want to remind our listeners that you're listening to Dateline Hamden on WNHH Radio, broadcast at 103.5 FM and live streamed at www.newhavenindependent.org. Today's guest is Hamden assessor John Gelati. So you said you'd love for Hamden to be a town that students can actually find a job in after they graduate. And we're talking about the Dixwell Avenue area right now as a place that's ripe for development. But of course, a lot of students, especially Quinnipiac students, live up in Mount Carmel. I think some Southern students and Albertus Magnus students live in around that Dixwell area. But Yale students obviously almost entirely live in New Haven. And if the town is going to develop that Dixwell Avenue corridor along the border with New Haven for business and for economic development, I think a lot of people say that they need to do it very carefully in a way that creates development that the people that already live there can actually take advantage of, and fosters the kinds of businesses that they would frequent and that they want in their community. How do you envision the town balancing the desires of the people that live there now and trying to make it a place that's attractive for students at Quinnipiac, for example?
Right. I think the goal is one and the same. I think that people who are currently living in Hamden would also like to have the benefit of that type of a community sort of downtown kind of area where they have access to that, and they don't really have to go anywhere to get what they need. It's all right there. So I don't think that it's only just young people that necessarily would be attracted. I think there's a lot of seniors or families that are to raise their children and as parents and have lots of memories, and they want to stay in Hamden, and so they want to have that asset of ease of services. So I don't think it necessarily has to be only just directed at young people, but I certainly think that it's good to cherish our youth, for sure.
And what can you do as assessor to try to realize some of these visions for that part of, for all of Hamden, and economic development in Hamden?
Well, Sam, to start with, I'm here today talking to you, so that's one point. I am trying to execute, as we're moving nearer to our reevaluation, a reevaluation which is of a high standard. There are circumstances which are unique at this time because of the tornado which occurred in Westwoods last year. And the effect of a natural disaster is there's no formula to just respond to that. It becomes really unique in every aspect. And part of the concern is being able to interpret and analyze the type of data which is used in the evaluation process in light of the impact that the tornado would have, and it impacts market conditions and market behaviors. So you have to realize that it created for some people a necessity to move quickly and longer return to get back. There's a lot of lost value with the trees and foliage, which are not actually valued other than from a sort of curb appeal impact, but are consideration. So, in terms of starting to analyze those sales that are occurring and, how are they impacted and how long are the houses on the market for, and, what is the result of that? and as well as well as the opportunity to make sure that the realtors are getting information and have are a partner with the town as well, and the citizens as well who perhaps do want to move. I want to see that be a great market. That's people can come and check out what's going on in Hamden, and real estate is really an asset, as are the school systems and the many benefits which the town provides, which is really exceptional. I mean, there's a lot of places where you might go to live. There's not really a great deal of entertainment. Hamden really does step up with it.
Yeah. So you mentioned the trees in the Westwoods neighborhood. That'll be a focus in the next revaluation. There's also been a lot of controversy about Neighborhood 40 in Southern Hamden. Could you talk a little bit about that? What happened there, and how can you deal with that going forward?
Yeah. Well, it appears that in the reevaluation of 2015, after some time, the residents of a particular area, which is identified for a market analysis purposes as Neighborhood 40, felt as though the amount of value shift was greater in that particular neighborhood to other parts of the town. Now, the process of reevaluation requires the engagement of the homeowner on several levels, and particularly when it comes to quality control, where there first is a verification of information, and then after analysis and a proposed value, they have an opportunity to attend informal hearings, and as a result, if they're not satisfied with the value, to attend an appeal process with the Board of Tax Review. And of course, there's the possibility of litigation beyond that. So it seems as though some time had expired between, there were some people who were engaged in reviewing, but as time went on, more and more people were concerned. And so that's a very important goal of the upcoming reevaluation of 2020, will be to be certain that all of the neighborhoods are fair and equitably valued. So I have spoken with, there is a group that sort of call themselves Neighborhood 40, and I've taken the time to provide them with any information that they wanted, and an explanation of perhaps what may have transpired. I don't really know for sure, as I was not in Hamden at the time, and so I really don't know any of the details. But from my review of all of what was available to review, it certainly seems as though it was a circumstance. There was no intention, anyone's part, to particularly single out that neighborhood, and certainly the Lang administration had nothing to do with any of those circumstances, other than as questions were being raised, they also raised the questions as well with concern. And the reevaluations are outsourced to independent companies, which is, of course, absolutely necessary, because the process of reevaluation is labor intensive in phases, and it would be pretty much impossible for type of revaluation to be done in-house, so to speak. So these concerns have, I think, settled to a considerable degree. We have, as I said, I've talked to them several times. There were some open meetings. I did have a public meeting to explain reevaluation, and to take the opportunity that they had asked me to speak at another meeting that they had that was following a debate. So every effort is being made at this point, at least to sort of at least clear the air as best that we can, and I hope that they will have confidence, and they have expressed to me that they, I have reassured them that on a go forward basis, everything will be certainly open and transparent, and the outcome, of course, will be fair and equitable assessments throughout the town.
How much? So you said, of course, Hamden outsources its revaluations. How much sway do you, as assessor, hold over the actual assessments that they come up with?
Well, ultimately, it is the assessor's position to accept the reevaluation recommendations or not. So in the end, it's the assessor. Assessor absolutely has a say. But as you know, Sam, I actually have a reevaluation certification license with the state to actually conduct the reevaluation. So I have, considerable insight into the process, and and of course what the expectations of outcomes should be. So I certainly will be meeting with the reevaluation analysts on a regular basis. They will still have the responsibility of conducting the analysis and coming up with conclusions. But I will be able to discern from their conclusions and the process of whether I think that all of the standards which are required in the reevaluation process, required by the state as well, are being met. And I also can say with uncompromising certainty that under no circumstances will there be any interference or influence by anyone, whether citizens, members of government. It's the assessor's job, and that's what the assessor is going to do. And in the conclusion, everyone, of course, it affects, of course, other parts of government. But I'm certain I've given Mayor Lang my word that I will assure him that the best possible job will be done, and he has assured me the same. He will let me do that.
And if you do decide that a certain area is being taxed unfairly, can you change that?
Well, it isn't exactly taxed unfairly. It would be assessed perhaps
assessed
unfairly. That's all right, just for the record, right? Okay. So, well, would I change that? Yes, to the extent that I would, want a different. Would want to see the analysis, of course, and if I had a different influencing opinion, I would be certain that I think that it's correct. I mean, I'm very reasonable, and you learn after 35 years of being in this business. I don't really have any expectation of what a value should or shouldn't be, but I certainly could understand whether something seems reasonable or unreasonable. And what is so complex in ad valorem appraisal, which is appraisal for the purpose of taxation, is that the assessments not only are a value that has to make sense to an analysis of just similar property types, but it has to make sense throughout the whole town, so that a property on one street makes sense to a property on another street, makes sense to a property on another street. So that's what's really complex, as opposed to when you might, if you were a property owner and you got a mortgage and you got an appraisal done, probably what you would do is, they would look at 3 sales, and out of those sales, they would make adjustments to the sales to come up with the value for the subject, and that would be based on appraisal standards, and that would be the appraisal's opinion of value on a particular date. So the complexity is that times, does it make sense to the whole? So I would certainly want perhaps further analysis, perhaps another opinion, and then ultimately, the review of informal hearings and the Board of Tax Review also could be a final appeal or review. And even at that point, as a result of these processes, which the property owner participates in, sometimes information is gained, and sometimes it's information that affects a whole area. And so, for that reason, it might result in changes in other values, and there would be re-notification and opportunities to have that correction. So that's what goes on until the values are final values. The analysis is pretty much open, and if new information comes to light, it would be taken into consideration.
Right. And if you said there might be changes in other values, does that mean if you have to change one area, say lower the assessments in one area, you might have to consider raising them in another?
There could be any number of relationships, but primarily, it wouldn't necessarily be the consequence of the relationship of one area to another area. It would be because information that was received or determined when you're analyzing one area might also have an impact on the analysis of information that you're using in another area. So it's not so much comparing one area to another as much as it would be including in the analysis of another area some of the information which you're able to gain through the appeal process.
I see. I've talked to some realtors in Hamden who say that the market is hot, but that's because property values are lowered because of high taxes. Is that something you're noticing in Hamden? And what is happening in Hamden? What are the characteristics of the market right now?
Well, nationally, the market which is very strong, doing very well, is the entry market.
Could you just explain what the entry market is?
Well, sort of like first-time owners or people trying to buy a house to get into the market. And part of what makes Hamden appealing if you think of Hamden just in its relationship to the surrounding towns, Orange, Woodbridge, Bethany, Cheshire, even North Haven as well. And you're looking at the relationship of values. When you try to purchase a house, and what we're seeing a lot of in general is that for people, first-time buyers are trying to get in, they have jobs because often it's families and they have a couple of incomes. So they have the income, but they might not have the savings. So that 20%, if it was necessary, is much less on a house that's $200,000 than on a house that's $300,000. So it makes entry into the market. And I think that the information, when we get sales, we report the sales to the state, the valid sales, and the state does a certain type of analysis. And the indication, I haven't gotten this last year's because it's not available yet, but for the prior years from the 15 reval, the the values were not going down, right, compared to the assessment, as the relationship to the assessment. So that's kind of like a good sign. And
Sorry, when you say the values were not going down in relation to the assessments, the values
the sales,
on the market.
we're not, there's a calculation with assessment too. So, but the basically, the conclusion is the values are not necessarily going down, and whether they are in maybe one area or another area, I haven't been able to break that up at this point, and that's a purpose of the reevaluation. And we're beginning to assemble the information, to look at that information, to think about it on that basis. But pretty much, even where there's a tax implication, it's accounted for. It comes into the total of what it costs you to have a house, and it's still a great thing to have, home ownership. It's still a good thing in America. So I don't think that Hamden, and often the concern that is expressed to me is, well, what's selling is people can't sell their house, it's low, the taxes are high, but some of those are market concerns and time on the market. It's a variance, and you have to see that becomes the market. And so that would be taken into consideration in terms of, how long a house needs to be on the market. Well, if that's what the market is, I mean, the economy over the years has changed considerably. And there were times when I remember when I was first in real estate where interest rates were 17 and 18%, houses maybe for $20,000, but still. So all of these factors are consideration.
See, houses are the assessed value of a house is 70% in Connecticut of the appraised value. Why is that?
I don't know, Sam. Why is that?
Why 70%? And is that common practice in other states?
No, it's not common practice. And I just entirely think it just adds to the confusion of people understanding assessment and calculation of taxes, and in terms of making any changes or adjustments or any kind of analysis, it's bringing in a percentage factor of all this to go on. I'm not sure. I mean, in my many years, in Rhode Island, and of course, as I said, I started in Connecticut, but I think that the compliance in Connecticut is very high in terms of regulatory requirements concerning probably a lot of things, but certainly municipal taxation. And
compliance
meaning there's every month there's a constant demand for certain types of reporting and percentage reporting on certain things a certain way, and type of consideration when you're looking at support from the state and allocation of funds. It's complicated, and I think that in general, and this is my personal opinion, but of years of the less regulation, the better off we are. I'm sorry, that's pretty much how I see it, and I see that on a personal level, and as well. And I think that the more that the public understands what is going on with taxation, how their property values are affected, how that affects their taxes.
Why do you think less regulation is good?
Because I think that it allows for just the marketplace to respond to, or I should say, it allows the government and interaction to valuations, et cetera, to respond to the marketplace and with less compromising. I mean, we see that in zoning and in the past. If you study, for instance, affordable housing, most of the analysis will indicate that, in fact, it's been regulatory zoning which has precluded the affordable housing and has actually raised the value of housing across the board. So, for example, so it's that type of a thing, and it also doesn't leave the assessor with a lot of flexibility. I mean, this taxation, and Sam, I know you've been at a few of my presentations, so I'm sure to say that an increase in taxes can make the difference of what some people eat. Now, and I say that with sincerity because of my years of professional experience, where I really did come in contact with people who lived in a house, were retired, maybe were working off of a little pension, and what was happening around them, wasn't really happening to their house. It was the same house. They maybe hadn't done anything in years to that house, and it's really very serious. And I always say that I hope the people I'm speaking to, that none of them are in that situation. But it's very important, and the assessor, should be able to try and help people wherever you can, and not have, requirements that if somebody who's elderly, well, an example would be, for instance, if someone who might be eligible for an exemption, which is a benefit, which is to do with them being elderly and to having maybe a limited income of some fix, and they get sick, and someone's trying to help them, and they don't know they have to reapply, and then there's a deadline, comes and goes, and the assessor has absolutely no discretion in changing or allowing that. And there is some truth, of course. You do have to have a line in the sand, otherwise everything would go on and on. But it's very important that you are able to help people. And I've always looked at policy and the implementation of policy as there's sort of two main considerations. And one is that you are or you are not eligible for something. And so if you are legally not eligible, then you're not eligible. But if you're not eligible because of the process or the procedure of, qualifying for the eligibility or filing for the eligibility, perhaps that's an area that should have some leniency. So it's not so much of just throwing everything out the window and saying nothing counts and you don't need any rules and it's just Wild West kind of thing. I'm not suggesting that at all, but I'm suggesting that the straighter the calculations are, the taxes are, the fairer they are, and the better people feel about paying their taxes because they're confident in where their tax came from, how it was figured, and if they need to do something about it, how to go about it.
Yeah. So there's a revaluation coming up.
Yes.
What are you working on now to get ready for that, and what should people in Hamden expect in the next, the next year?
Mm-hmm. Well, I am doing analysis of natural disaster consequences, so that's part of my own study, so that I will be able to advise the revaluation company as well, whoever that might be. The process will be that people will receive a data mailer, and that will have information about the property, and we'll ask them to review it and to make corrections if necessary. And
when will that come out?
That most likely would occur either the end of this year, the very beginning next year. And then that information is taken by the reval company and edited if necessary. It's an opportunity for a property owner to say, no, I want you to come in and inspect my house because I have this issue, I have that issue, and I want to make sure, it's taken into consideration. Sales are inspected so that, you have a better understanding of how they're valued. And today, with what's available online, it's easy to go online as an analyst and see houses that are on the market. What are they on the market for? And you look at the house and you go, wow, it's brand new kitchen, brand new bath, brand new, and compared to, say, another house that's on the market that has a different price, But asking prices are not the basis of analysis, actual sales. But, it's an indication of what's to come. And the sales are taken into consideration up to October 1st of 2020, which would be the date of valuation. And in appraisal, you do have to have one defined date. Otherwise, it could go on forever, However, and this has come up, and I think people are concerned, certainly sales that occur after are looked at in the sense of not as part of the analysis, but certainly you want to look at the appraisal value that you have on a property that sells, say, 2 months later, that sells in December. You want to make sure those numbers seem to be lining up. So again, there's like an indication there of the validity of numbers, which have a statistical analysis requirement for the state, which in order to make the reval presentable. So that after the analysis is conducted and preliminary values are proposed, the public will receive that information and they will have an opportunity to start the cycle of an informal hearing if they wish.
They'll receive that information when?
Well, it would be after October 1st. So it would be in the late fall of 2020. So it would be in the late fall of 2020. It would be an opportunity for them to look into that. I have anticipation of a flyover as part of the reevaluation, which is now being used more and more.
And is that literally something flies over and
the
takes
plane,
photographs?
films all the real estate, and the technology now is so refined that you can actually, just with software, take the dimensions that are on the photo and superimpose them on the sketch to make a determination of whether the exterior measurements, which are the measurements they're used. There's never interior measurements made, by the way, in reevaluation or property cards. It's all an exterior measurement. But another benefit of this is that tremendously valuable to safety departments. And so there's a lot of opportunities, as far as engineering as well, to use the benefit of this flyover, which is not tremendously costly, and it's being used more and more. So that will, of course, help to verify information. And so as I get back, there's informal hearings, and see how that goes from there. And eventually, the role, if it's accepted, would become.
Well, that's about all the time we have. Thank you, John, for coming in.
Thank you so much, Sam, for inviting me today. It was a pleasure speaking.
Thank you for joining us today on WNHH FM's Dateline Hamden. Thanks again to today's guest, Hamden Assessor John Gelati. Thanks to Brian Slattery for producing today's program, and thanks for listening.
Hi, this is Bella, and you are listening WN 8 L P 1 O 3.5 F M New Haven Streaming Live at www. Dot. No, yeah. Dot org.
I ain't looking for the part-time lover. I ain't looking for the player that wanna play games. I ain't looking for somebody that's willing to invest. Need somebody that's gonna love me. I'm a whole lot of woman. I'm a whole lot of love, baby. When I love you, I'ma love you right. But before we go there, baby, let me tell you something that you gotta do me right. I'm a queen, high quality. I'm a queen. Be careful when you handle me. I'm a queen, baby. I'm a queen. Step back, watch me do my thing. I ain't looking for no part-time love. You ain't about this life, then be on your way. I don't need no drama, I don't need no trouble. Don't bring around me. I'm a whole lot of woman, I'm a whole lot of love, baby. When I love you, I'ma love you right. But before we go there, baby, let me tell you something that you gotta do me right. Oh, queen, high quality. I'm a queen. Be careful when you handle me. I'm a queen. Woo woo. I think I need some help, ladies. Do you really want me, baby? Yeah. And do you really need me, baby? Yeah. If you wanna be with me, gotta treat me like a queen, gotta treat me like a lady. Do you really want me, baby? Yeah. And do you really need me, baby? Yeah. If you wanna be with me, gotta treat me like a queen, gotta treat me like a lady. Do you really want me, baby? Yeah. And do you really need me, baby? Yeah. If you wanna be with me, gotta treat me like a queen, gotta treat me like a lady. Do you want me, baby? Yeah. Do you need me, baby? Yeah. And if you wanna be with me, gotta treat me like a queen, gotta treat me like a lady. 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 You gotta take your time with me.
That was Stout with Queen, and you're listening to Northern Remedy here on WNHHLP 103.5 FM. This is the show dedicated to New Haven's music, past, present, and future. I'm your host, Brian Slattery. I'm the arts editor of the New Haven Independent, and with me here is Stout herself, aka Denise Renee.
Hey, good afternoon.
Thank you so much for being on this show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
So tell us about the song we just heard.
Queen, that is my latest single, or my debut single, under my artist name Stout. So excited about it. It's been out since December, and it's making some noise.
Yeah, tell us about the whole sound of the song, because you have like a specific. I feel like you have a thing, where it's like it's obviously centered on the voice, and there's something very like sparse, and at the same time, like very like carefully and wonderfully plotted out rhythms that keep things like really moving along.
Yes. Man, I'm inspired by so much. I mean, I've been a music connoisseur, if you will, since I was born. And I think that with this particular sound, I really wanted to kind of give it like a throwback feel, reminiscent of you know, like Prince and of course Vanity Six. That's
Yeah.
what was really inspiring me at the moment.
Can you get your microphone a little closer?
Yeah, that was really what was
Oh, there you
inspiring
are.
me at the moment. Which excuse me, I said I was inspired by Prince and Vanity Six.
Yeah.
For this particular record, and it just felt good.
It's super Prince like,
Yeah.
which, you know, will never get old.
I mean, never get old. And that's an honor, man. People say it all the time. Like,
Yeah.
oh, it reminds me of Prince. I mean, that's an
Yeah.
honor.
Yeah,
So,
right.
yeah,
Right, you would take that comparison all day long.
absolutely. He's a legend forever, you know? So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yep, totally. I felt that way when people accused Janelle Monáe's song of being too much like Prince, and you go like, as if that's a problem. Are you?
Yeah. I love her. Shout out to Janelle Monáe. We
Right.
just played Coachella, and she opened up for Childish Gambino.
Mhm.
And we got to watch her both weekends. And I mean, she's just amazing. And yes, you can tell that the Prince influence is there, but I mean, she puts her own thing into
Absolutely.
it too. So it's like,
I mean, absolutely.
so good.
Right. You can't
Yeah.
imagine. You can imagine Prince just being very pleased from wherever
Absolutely.
he is now.
Especially if you're doing it right. You know, she's doing it right, you know, so I'm sure he's pleased.
Yes. Yes. So you have this pretty amazing career that
Mm.
yeah. But before we get into that, you are born and raised here in New Haven.
I am.
And let's take you back to the very beginning. Like, when did you first start singing? How old were you?
I was, well, first I started playing the drums.
Cool.
I always like to talk about that because that's a huge part of me, as you know, as an artist. Started playing the drums first in my grandmother.
It explains a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. In my great grandma's church. Shortly thereafter, at the age of 5.
What church were you at?
So the name of the church was Apostolic Love and Faith Tabernacle.
Mm. And where was it?
In New Haven, Connecticut. It was in the basement of my great grandmother's house.
Cool. What
Yeah.
neighborhood was that?
In the hill section of New Haven,
Mm-hmm.
Hallock Avenue.
Nice.
And the house is still standing there. So that's where I got my start, man. Playing the drums first, and I started singing, you know, right after that at the age of 5.
Was your grandmother the pastor of the church?
The pastor of the church?
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, my mother was one of the evangelists in the church. It was a family thing. It was a family church.
Cool.
So yeah, that's where I started. Started playing the drums and then started singing at the age of 5.
Yeah.
Started singing in the youth choir, and then, you know, started leading because someone in the choir noticed my voice, one of the leaders, and pulled me to the front. And the rest is history, you know.
So tell me more about this youth choir.
Youth choir, we were called the Busy Bees.
Uh-huh.
If you know anything about, you know, choirs or, you know, Pentecostal churches, all of the choirs have like a name.
Yeah.
And
right.
that was the name of our choir. It's called the Busy Bees.
Cool.
And I was one of the leaders. And I remember one of the first songs that I led. Let Your Hallelujah Roll.
Nice. How many
Yeah.
people were in the choir?
Oh gosh, it was a lot of kids. So I would say maybe like 15 to 20
Cool.
of us in the choir.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you stood out at the age of 5.
I guess so, yeah. I knew what I wanted to do. I knew that I could, and so I did, and it would just kind of come out. I was kind of boisterous, so
Yeah.
it came out. And
Right.
you know, thank God for that woman that said, "Hey, come to the front. You lead this song."
Now, who was that woman?
I can't remember, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
I want to say
right.
that she's been in our church for a long time, and I can't quite remember who it was, but I just remember someone pointing and saying, "I heard that. Come up here."
Nice.
You know?
Oh my God, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, whoever she is, she had good ears.
She did. She did. Thank God for her. Started to help me to kind of jumpstart, you know, my love for singing.
Right. So then, where did the singing take you?
Man, you know, as I continued on in my great grandma's church. I was playing the drums for services. I kind of like shared
Did you sing
the
and play drums at the
responsibility.
same time?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. Nice.
But I shared the responsibility of carrying the service by playing the drums with another. He was like a cousin to me. His name was Anderson. Anderson Cherry. So I would play like first and second. He would do like third and fifth or something like that, or third
Cool.
and fourth, whatever. So we kind of shared those responsibilities. So I would play the drums and I would go and sing, and he would play while I sung.
Nice.
So kept doing that, and in my teenage years, I started to get invited to different churches around the community, like in
Cool.
Bridgeport and
Nice.
Hartford, and you know, of course, in New Haven, singing at youth services, and,
Right.
you know, midnight musicals and things like that. And
Yeah.
then at the age of like 20 is when I really knew that, okay, I really want to pursue music.
Right. So, as a musician myself, I am always jealous of the kind of musical training that people get by growing up in a musical church.
Mm-hmm.
There's something very there's something, I mean, it just seems like an incredible training, you know, like both in just terms of like like the raw skill, like the stamina, the endurance, but also of course there's the phrasing and the way of singing,
right,
that translates like across faiths, across cultures, across all of those things.
Yeah, it's deeply rooted. I think all music is deeply rooted, but I mean, you know, of course, like with gospel music, it's just, I don't know, it's filled with the Spirit. What can I say? It's filled with the Holy Spirit, so it definitely brings about a different sound and different passion that comes from so much joy, anguish, you know, circumstances. And I think that, you know, for me, looking back on the history of, you know, slaves and other, you know, different oppressions, I feel like they use music and they use their own imaginations and their own sounds and colors to carry them through, which birth that gospel sound.
Yeah.
You know, so
right.
I feel like that's why it's just so different.
Yeah.
You know, so powerful.
Right. Yeah, it's always there.
Yeah. And I think that for me, my own theory, a lot of, you know, different genres was, you know, derived from gospel music. To me, that's my own theory. Funk music, blues, to me, even rock. You know, you think about Rosetta Tharpe.
Absolutely.
How Elvis Presley, you know, in the Rolling Stones, they found, you know, they looked to her and she came to church.
Right.
You know, so.
Stay close to that microphone. I want to hear every
Can
word
you
you're
hear?
saying.
Yes, yes. Sorry.
Yes. Oh no, totally fine. Yeah, I mean, I feel like, so, you know, as a white guy getting into black music sideways, kind of, you know, it's like you know, I think those of us who are music fans find our own ways in, and it ends up being a really kind of like convoluted path. But I was one of those people who I could hear sort of like you know, you listen to like a Parliament album and you could hear like prison work songs in it, and you could hear church in it, and you could hear all of those things.
Absolutely.
Like it's all there.
In everything. It's in country music. You know, it's an alternative. I think we all, I feel like,
and I hear no matter I hear it like in D'Angelo's music in a huge way.
Oh, just absolutely.
The sounds of those voices together, and just the rhythm of it, and the way that he puts his music together. And
absolutely, that's like good old. I feel like his music comes from, you know, quartet. Yeah. You know, he was raised on that. You know, so he put his own spin on. Yeah, man. You know, he's like, for me, like the godfather of neo soul, if you will. You know, if I can say that, I feel like he's like one of the godfathers of that whole sound, and that's again derived from a church or gospel sound,
right?
Which in that aspect, like I said, is called quartet music, which came from the South, you know. And of course we have it, you know, a lot of people, we have groups up in the North as well, but it really came from the South. So somehow, some way, everything that we listen to kind of goes back to gospel music. You
right.
That's my theory, and I'm sticking to it.
It certainly makes sense. I mean, you can hear it.
Yeah, you can.
No question.
And everything.
So where did you go to, what schools did you go to when you were growing up in New Haven?
So I went to Truman Elementary, then I went on to Roberto Clemente.
Nice.
And I went on to I did a year at Cross, and then I finished at Hill House High School. That's where I graduated.
Cool.
And then I did some time at Gateway College.
Nice.
Yeah.
Now, did you sing in school also?
I did.
What did you
Everybody that knows me, shout out to all of my childhood friends. If you may be listening on Facebook Live, hi, hey y'all. Since I mean, you know, I can remember since elementary school, you know, singing in the hallways or always wanting to be in chorus, and I pretty much always was.
Yeah.
In my elementary school, in my grade school, then my elementary school, and into high school, singing. Every choir.
Did you sing in any, like, were there like you know, high school musicals you sang in, or were there?
I want to
Or
say
other other kinds of things that happen in school?
no, back then no, it was just
Yeah.
the chorus, and then we would of course like perform for the different holidays. Of course, like Black History Month,
Yeah.
the holidays. Of course, we would have our winter concerts and spring
Right.
concerts. So everything that I did in school was associated with the chorus. Yep, everything. And then we had a little bit of drama things, but it wasn't like High School Musicals. But back then, it was just more so associated with the chorus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, right on. So I interrupted you about 5 minutes ago when you said, then when you were 20, you said, this is what I want to do.
Yeah. This is what I wanted to do. I was working a job and I was just like,
Where
what?
were you working?
I was working for the phone company. It was, back then it was known as SNET.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Connecticut. It was called SNET. Now it went to AT&T. Now it's Frontier.
Right.
And I was a customer service rep, and I'm a single mother of my first child. And with the help of my mom, I was just like, this isn't for me. This, this environment isn't for me. But mom, I know what I want to do, and I just need to get out. I need to go to New York. I need to just get out there. And, if it doesn't work out in this amount of time, I'll go back to working.
Cool.
Just need your help, mom. And my mom helped me.
What is your mom's name?
Say again?
What's your mom's name?
Mary. Shout out to my mommy. Hi, Mary. So yeah, she pretty much, so always has supported me. But in that time, at the age of like 2021, I stepped out and, started going to New York, going to different open mics. The Village Underground, to be exact, that is a legendary open mic in the New York area. It has since closed.
Right.
But it's been around for, over 2 decades. And
Right.
that was a big part of me. That was a big part of me figuring out who I was as a performer, going to that open mic and other things that I did. So that's when it really started, at the age of like 20.
So you leave your son with your mom, going to New York City, and see what waves you could start making.
Yeah.
Now, how did you know to go there as opposed to, anywhere else? Like what was it that made you go, I'm going to the Village Underground in particular?
Shout out to my folks on Instagram Live. I'm sitting here with Brian. We're talking, so just pay attention. Back then, in the late 90s into the 2000s, we really didn't have a live music scene.
Yeah.
At least for like soul and
Right.
soul and funk. I would say, I know we had like Toad's Place, but it was back then they were booking more so rock acts and indie rock acts. I don't know if
Yeah, right.
right? Would you agree?
I moved here in 2003, but I know what you mean. It was like any R&B soul acts that came through there were national level acts, like not nurturing of the local scene.
No, not
Yeah.
really, And if it did exist, maybe I didn't know because I was so sheltered as far as, religion.
Yeah.
Because when I was coming up, I was taught that, you can only sing gospel music. So maybe it did exist and I just didn't really know that it was here, but I kind of looked around. I didn't really find anything. So I started going to New York, making new friends. One friend in particular, Jessica Wilson, she's an amazing artist as well. She really, took me by the hand and was like, come on, let's do this. Come on, sing background for me. Or
Nice.
come on, let's, plugging me into different things. And that
Right.
was the beginning because of that person, Jessica Wilson. She plugged me in with Alicia Keys.
Cool. And was she based in New York?
She's based in New York. She's
Yeah.
not now, she's in Nashville,
Right.
but then she was based in New York and
Cool.
really started showing me the ropes because again, I was sheltered. I was just a church singer, gospel singer,
Yeah.
singing in church, you know,
Right.
so.
Now, was there any tension with you crossing over to secular music?
I think so.
Like,
Because if someone looks at you and they know you, let's just say Brian, he always has dark hair, and then all of a sudden you pop up with this red hair, you're gonna have some people that's like,
wait a minute. Yeah.
wow, like, what are you going through? Or you're gonna have some people that's gonna understand,
Are
like,
you okay?
oh, that's super cool, man.
Mhm.
And then you're gonna have some people that's just like, oh, that's weird. I can't be around you. So I think I've experienced those different emotions in the past like few years, but I think it's beautiful.
Yeah,
You
right.
know, just to
Tell me a little bit more about that. Like how much
Yeah.
of that was external and how much was internal?
I think 50-50 because again, I was raised in the church, raised to only sing gospel music and pretty
Yeah.
much had that set in my mind. And then life happened and I started to change and started to see the world and my perception of music differently in the past few years. And I felt like my expression should not and cannot only be limited to just gospel music.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I feel like anything that I sing is the gospel because I'm coming from my
Yes.
heart. Can't speak for anyone else. I can only speak for me.
Mm.
Everything that I sing with intention. Everything that I sing, I want to convey a message, and that is the gospel.
Yeah.
Whether you're talking about love, whether you're talking about love lost, whether you're talking about wanting love, whether you're talking about struggles or happiness, that's the gospel. That's what gospel music is. It's good news.
Ha. I love it.
Yeah.
How did
y'all
your
feel me?
yeah, absolutely.
You feel
How
me,
did
Brian?
how does your how did your family feel about it?
My family is super supportive.
Yeah.
My mom,
I
Mary.
mean, clearly your mom was okay with it because you
Yeah.
said, "I'm going into New York. Can you take care
Yeah.
of my son?
Yeah,
I'm doing
my
this
daughter.
thing."
Sorry. Yeah, my first.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. My first child, my daughter.
Yes.
Yeah, she was super supportive. Back then, my family, my extended family, like my aunts and my uncles, they were all supportive. If there were people that wasn't, they didn't necessarily come to my face and say it. Maybe it was said behind the scenes. Of course, people are always gonna talk, and I feel like
Yeah.
that existed. But I was so engulfed in it that I did not care.
Yeah.
Because I knew that this was a part of my purpose. I knew that this was a part of my journey.
Nice.
So I don't know. I just really didn't like go knocking like, oh, who's saying what here?
Yeah.
Because the main thing for me in music and what I do, like I said before, is I have to convey a message. And it's either you're going to receive it, you're going to follow and come on the journey with me, or you're not. And if you don't, it's cool. I still love you. Hi. So,
Right.
Yeah.
So tell me more about it's Jennifer Wilson, right? Did I get the name right?
Jessica Wilson.
Jessica Wilson.
Yeah.
Sorry. So I get for
Yeah.
not writing things down when I'm talking.
No, it's cool.
Yeah.
Jessica Wilson is a powerhouse, man. An amazing singer, an amazing writer. Not just saying it, I know it because I've seen her grow over the years, and she was great back then.
Yeah.
Just ahead of her time.
What was she doing musically?
She was pursuing her solo career.
Nice.
And she was doing a couple of showcases around New York. At the time, she was signed to MBK Management, Jeff Robinson, who was Alicia Keys' original manager.
So was she doing like R&B?
Yeah, R&B soul.
Mhm.
Yeah. Playing like BB King's,
Nice.
the Bluebird. She was playing some pretty, amazing venues at a young age.
Right.
And she took me along for the ride. And
Cool.
it really opened me up to so much more. It really showed me like, oh yeah, this is my destiny too.
Yeah. How
Be
did
a
you
songwriter.
connect with her? Like, what was the moment that you connected with her?
We connected in the New York scene. We both had mutual friends.
Do you remember the first time you met her?
Yes, in Queens, New York. I think when I want to say at like a service or something, or through some friends. It was just like we were hanging out at a diner. Yeah, USA Diner in Queens.
So did you hang out before she heard you sing?
Yes, and I want to say yes, and I want to say she knew that I can sing because of our mutual friends, and I knew
Yeah.
that she could as
Right.
well.
But you hadn't actually heard each other.
Yeah, no, we didn't know each other.
Ah, that's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, so we met through mutual friends.
So then when did you first sing together?
When did what?
When did you first sing together?
Oh gosh, maybe like a year after we met,
Wow.
and I
cool.
sung background for her.
Nice.
And I want to say our first gig was like BB King's.
Nice.
Yeah, her set was really, really, really dope. And she had a band called Hillside. It was Jessica Wilson and Hillside.
Nice.
Yeah.
How big was the band?
3 singers, maybe 5-piece band.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
great. And then what was her connection to Alicia Keys?
She was singing background for her.
Nice.
And that was because they were sharing the same management.
right.
So it just kind of worked out that she was already in place and there. And she was touring with Alicia for the first record.
Mhm.
Then when the second record came about, Diary of Alicia Keys, she was looking for singers, and it just happened like that. It was the will of God, I always say, for me to do that.
Right.
It was mine.
Yeah, right. To
And
just
I
have
didn't
like
even know it.
to have one connection from I'm in a diner with this person to I am on stage with Alicia Keys.
Yes.
That's great.
Yep.
Hey man, I love it. So how long did that take?
To link up with Alicia?
Like between when you I'm sorry, that. How long did what take, right? Between when you first started going to New York and when you hooked up with Alicia Keys.
I would say maybe 1.5, like a year and a half, maybe,
Cool.
because we met through mutual friends in like 2001,
Yeah.
going into 2002,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
And-
And I started with Alicia in like September of 2003, something like that.
Cool.
Yeah.
So had you set a deadline for yourself when you first started going into New York, saying if this doesn't happen by
Yeah.
what was the deadline?
So basically, I want to say I resigned from my job in the spring, and I
Mhm.
said by by late summer, if I don't have anything that's going to, replace what I'm not getting from my job, then I'll just go back into the work field. I told my mom I'll get a temp job.
Yeah, right.
I was always ambitious and very independent, didn't like to just sit at home, so I knew I would get a job, and I
Right.
was just like,
Right, you can always get another job.
yeah, I
But you
wasn't gonna
wanna-
give up on singing, but I was like, I know I need money, so I'll go back to work, and so I gave myself until the summer, and that I did go back to work.
Mm-hmm.
I started working for a temp agency, and I started working for a brokerage firm in New Haven, and I got the call in like late August into September, and I started with her like mid-September.
Cool. So by the time you went back to doing the temping, you kind of had the ball was rolling at that point.
Yeah, it was not for Alicia Keys though. It was just like kind of like going to New York and doing some gigs and starting to get like a little bit of paying gigs, but it wasn't enough to support me and my daughter. So,
but enough to make you think I should keep doing this and see where it goes.
Absolutely, yeah.
yeah,
It was enough
that
to
makes
keep me going.
Cool.
Yeah, inspired.
So how was it going from I am singing around and I'm singing in New York and I've got my temp job to now I am on? How long was the tour with Alicia Keys?
Oh gosh, that I started in 03 and I stopped in 06. And I stopped.
That is quite a transition.
Yeah. Right? It was just like a whirlwind. It was just like a
Right.
whole new life, whole new perception, a whole new level of inspiration. And the only reason why I stopped because I had, stepped down because I was, getting ready to get married and my life was changing.
Cool.
But the time that I spent there is priceless, and I will forever be so grateful.
Oh, absolutely.
To Alicia and the whole
Man, oh,
crew.
man.
We're all still friends.
Right.
For that time.
Right. So where did you? How many days of the year did you tour? Like how many?
We were never home.
Yeah.
Maybe for the holidays.
Mm.
Right back out.
Right.
In those 3 years, I was just like almost never home.
Mm.
It's funny because I look at artists today and there's not a lot of people that's doing like straight through like 6 months or 7 month tours.
Yeah.
That's what they were doing back then. And of course, I know even before that time,
right.
Artists would like go all year.
Totally.
And that's kind of like what we were doing. We would have like little breaks here and there. I'm talking about days, 2 or 3 days, and then back out for 2 or 3 months.
Mm.
So that was my life for 3 years, almost 3.5 years.
Yeah. Where was your daughter during all of that?
With my mom.
Cool.
And extended family as well. They
Nice.
supported me and supported her while I was working.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you must have talked on the phone all the time.
Oh, yeah. Back then, FaceTime and things didn't exist. It was phone calls. It was getting the calling cards. Remember that?
Yeah.
I think I'm telling my age, y'all. Oh, my God. But, yeah. Calling cards and, oh, my God, collect calls and stuff.
Right.
Well, we did it every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That must have been hard, though.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
I think that's the part that people, aspiring to do this maybe don't look at, even if you don't have children, to leave what you know and what you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
It's exciting at first, and then you'll have your moments where you'll have those lows, where it's like, oh,
you're like, what am I doing here?
Yeah, what am I doing? Or,
yeah.
Oh, I miss home, or I miss this. And, it's like that roller coaster. But then, over time and practice, you find a balance.
Right.
But it is not easy. You
Yeah.
know, I think some people look at what we do or what I do and other artists do that you see on TV and you think that it's just so glamorous. Some of it is, don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
but a lot of it, it's a lot of hard work that goes into it,
Yeah.
you know?
Absolutely.
But you have to be built for it.
Right.
You have to be. So
Tell me
and
a
I
little
am.
bit. Tell me a little bit more about that. Like, how do you feel that you're built for it?
You just know, you feel it inside. It's just this driving force. Like, you know, I can speak from my experiences. Like, you know, really missing my daughter, there would be tears, you know, at the time. I would shed a tear and like, but then I would wipe my tears because I knew that I was setting up a legacy for her. You know, her being able to watch mommy on TV and live out my dream, even if it was behind another artist. It was like, that's my mom and she's doing this. And, you know, through me singing for Alicia and others, it inspired me to go after my own. And here I am today, living out my dream, you know, and I feel like the tears were worth it because.
Oh, no worries.
The tears, you know, was worth it because she's able to, I was able to show her, teach her, and now she's walking in those footsteps.
Yeah, right. And tell me, but also tell me about some of the highs. I mean, the other reason it's worth it is because I imagine there were some nights where you're like, that's why I'm doing that.
Oh man, the highs is just what the reaction on the faces of the people, the magic and the energy and the chemistry that you feel between you and the band members, and then the exchange with the audience. That is so beautiful. You can't pay anybody to get that. It's a natural feeling that is so addicting.
Yeah.
And it's not like, oh, I want to do this because I want to make people like me or praise me, but it's just like, as a consumer, I know how I feel when I'm in the audience and I can feel the artist's heart. It inspires me. It motivates me. So to know that I can do that and offer that to the listeners that come and see me, that is the high. Because you're here and I'm here to inspire, to motivate, to make you feel good, to make you dance, to make you feel better about life. So if that's happening, that's the high. Yeah. That is the high of it all.
Yeah. I imagine on a good tour that happens like a lot.
Absolutely.
You know, it's every other night, maybe most nights, that kind of thing.
Oh, absolutely. You know, I'll keep saying this, man. When you're digging from the heart and you really are intentional about what you're doing with your music, your voice, your instrument, and then you pair it with others that are like-minded, that is absolute magic. Absolute magic.
Yeah.
You know, so, and I've been blessed to be involved with those type of camps, if you will, or bands for my, you know, my entire singing life. Where it started in my church, to Alicia, you know, to J.J. Harrison and Youthful Praise, which is a very well-known Connecticut choir. They're, you know, very famous, have done very well. Jessica Wilson, you know, countless others. Corey Henry and the Funk Apostles, which I am a part of.
Nice.
I've been blessed to be a part of situations like that and bands like that and have that magic with my colleagues.
Yeah.
You know, Childish
like
Gambino.
Over and over.
Yeah. Over and over. So it's like, thank you, Lord, for connecting me with these, you know, these people and these gifts.
Right.
Yeah.
But so you said that you stopped touring because you got married.
Got married.
So tell me about that.
Yeah, I got married. And,
how did you meet a future husband while touring relentlessly?
You know, look at me. I'm beautiful. That's how. No, I was kidding. No, I'm not kidding. Well, you know.
No, it's more like
minds attract.
How did you have the time to?
I know.
Yeah.
I mean, you always have time for something that you want, or if you find if somebody connect with somebody and there's an interest, you make time.